Picture this. At the edge of the Sahara Desert, Amadou, the rice trader, with a dreamer's heart, dares to chase the impossible. He's got wealth, wives, and kids, but one burning wish, to read and write, drives him into the desert's jaws. Sandstorms blind him, bandits strike with flashing blades, and death stalks his every step on a dangerous journey to find a teacher. Along the way, he crosses paths with a mysterious classmate who wasn't entirely human, a genie in disguise. Their friendship unlocks a magical world hidden in plain sight, but the real magic begins when he slips on a silver ring and falls for Anta, a breathtaking genie. Love blooms, trials test him, and a marriage defies worlds until disaster crashes down. Fires rage, beasts die, and secrets unravel. Will Amadou lose it all? Stay with us, because what begins as one man's thirst for knowledge will end in magic, heartbreak, and a timeless lesson about promises and the price of betrayal. A long, long time ago, on the southern edge of the mighty Sahara Desert, there stood the Sahelian town of Oualo. From afar, Oualo shimmered like an oasis, its red clay houses clustered tightly together, bordered by dry acacia trees and whispering baobabs. The air shimmered with heat, and the horizon stretched endlessly, a golden sea of dunes interrupted only by the occasional silhouette of a baobab tree. The winds from the desert carried fine grains of sand into every corner of the town, and yet life thrived. Women wrapped in bright fabrics carried clay pots on their heads, and children laughed as they chased goats through the dusty streets. Merchants hawked millet, dates, leather goods, and woven fabrics under thatched stalls at the market square. At sunrise, the calls of prayer echoed gently across the horizon, mingling with the cries of desert birds. The scent of roasted groundnuts, millet porridge, and burning wood perfumed the air. The people of Oualo lived simply, their lives tied to the rhythms of the seasons, the flow of the Senegal River, and the bounty of the rice fields that sustained them. In this town lived a man named Amadou. From the time he was a small boy, chasing lizards through the dusty streets, Amadou harbored a burning desire to learn how to read and write. He would watch the griots recite tales of ancient kings and warriors, their words weaving magic in the air, and he longed to capture such stories with his own hands. Amadou longed to learn how to read and write, to understand the words of the Quran, and to be counted among the learned men. Yet in Oualo, teachers were few, and most had made their homes in the larger towns of Kayor, far to the east. In those days, teachers were as rare as rain in the desert, and most resided in distant towns like Kayor, a bustling center of knowledge far from Oualo's quiet borders. With no one to guide him, Amadou's dream remained a flickering ember buried beneath the demands of survival. As the years passed, Amadou grew into a strong and determined man. He grew into a tall man with kind eyes, high cheekbones, and a voice like flowing water. He married 2 wives, Aissatu and Fatou, who filled his compound with laughter and the patter of children's feet. He turned his sharp mind to trade, building a thriving rice business that became the pride of Oualo. Every month, he would load his camels and horses with sacks of rice harvested from the fertile plains along the Senegal River. Each morning, he strode into the fields, overseeing workers as they bent over the shimmering paddies, their hands plunging into the muddy water to pluck the ripe grains. The sacks were piled high like small mountains on his camels, and Amadou rode at the front of his caravan, dressed in flowing indigo robes, leading the animals skillfully across scorching sands and thorny scrublands. His caravan snaked across the land like a desert serpent, bringing back rice to trade for gold, cloth, salt, and other goods. The sounds of jingling camel bells and the murmurs of traders filled the air. Amadou bartered tirelessly in the marketplace, his voice ringing out as he struck deals with merchants from neighboring villages. Sacks of rice piled high in his storeroom, their earthy scent mingling with the dry Sahelian air. And his wealth grew until his name was spoken with respect across the region. But even as Amadou's wealth grew, he carried an ache deep inside him, a childhood dream left unfulfilled. Despite his success, the ember of his childhood dream never faded. At night, as the stars glittered above Oualo, Amadou would sit by the fire, tracing shapes in the sand with a stick, imagining they were letters he could one day understand. Finally, at the age of 35, with his family secure and his business flourishing, Amadou resolved to pursue his longing. One day, after returning from a successful journey, he gathered his wives and children beneath the wide branches of the compound's mango tree and announced his decision. "I have traded rice for wealth and have given you all a comfortable life," he told them, all wondering where this conversation was leading. Then he added, "Now, I must trade time for knowledge." The children looked at him with further confusion in their eyes, although the wives had already understood what was coming next. "I leave tomorrow for Kayor," he said, his voice steady with purpose. "I will find a teacher and learn to read and write, as I've always dreamed." His wives nodded solemnly, though their eyes betrayed their worry, and his children clung to his robes, reluctant to let him go. With a final embrace, he bid farewell to his wives, kissed his children, and prepared for the journey ahead. The next day, Amadou set out at dawn, the first light painting the dunes in hues of gold on a journey more dangerous than any he had taken. Amadou's journey to Kayor was long and treacherous. The route stretched far across the dry belly of the Sahel and the edges of the desert. He joined a caravan of traders, scholars, and pilgrims, all of them riding horses and camels across the merciless sands, their voices rising in song to ward off the silence of the desert. Amadou rode a sturdy horse, its hooves kicking up clouds of dust, while camels swayed beside him, their humps laden with goods, sacks of millet, bolts of dyed cloth, and of course, his own rice. The caravan stretched across the sands like a living thread, winding through a landscape that shimmered with heat and menace, on a journey where nature itself waged war against them. The Sahara was a merciless expanse, its dunes rising like waves frozen in time, hiding scorpions and vipers beneath their crests. By day, the sun beat down like a hammer, turning the sand into a sea of fire. The glare stung their eyes and blistered their lips. By night, the cold winds sliced through their robes, chilling them to the bone, while howling as if mourning the lost. The caravan battled fierce, blinding sandstorms that roared across the desert like angry spirits. Walls of sand rose high into the sky, swallowing the sun and turning day into darkness. The winds howled like wolves, lashing at the travelers' faces, tearing at their robes and choking their lungs with fine grains of dust. Men shouted to one another over the roaring storm, trying to keep the camels from breaking loose and fleeing into the void. Amadou held tightly to the reins of his horse, squinting through slits in his turban as the sand bit into his skin like 1,000 needles. When the storms passed, the path stretched on, bleak and unforgiving. They crossed plains where the earth was cracked and broken, the bones of animals and men scattered like forgotten prayers. Bleached skulls and brittle ribs lay half buried in the sand, grim reminders of those who had not survived this merciless journey. At dusk, shadows lengthened across the rocks and ravines, and the caravan slowed. Narrow gullies and steep cliffs loomed on either side, perfect hiding places for bandits. Eyes flicked nervously toward the dark hollows, and every man kept a hand on his dagger. The caravan leaders rode ahead with sharp eyes and sharp spears. For weeks, they pressed on, guided by the stars and the weathered wisdom of the caravan leader, a grizzled man named Samba. They crossed dry riverbeds where the earth cracked like broken pottery, skirted bandits' trails, marked by the bones of the unlucky, and rationed their water as the leather skins grew lighter. Each night, they circled their camels and horses, building fires that crackled weakly against the vast darkness. Guards were posted at every corner, spears in hand, eyes wide and sleepless, lying in wait for both bandits and beats that emerged from the depths of the desert. The air trembled with the tension of men too tired to sleep, but too fearful to rest. On such nights, Amadou sat by the fire, his face streaked with grit and sweat. His turban was caked with dust, and when he removed it to wipe his brow, his hair was stiff with sand. The firelight flickered in his tired eyes, but he said nothing, staring into the flames as the cold desert winds whispered around him. During these nights, he went into silent, open-eyed dreams, staring into the flames. He thought of Oualo, of his family, and of the dream that drove him forward. He deeply missed the home life he was used to, and the life of the market trade, and for a moment wished that he was back home. But he would quickly pull himself out of such sojourns when he remembered the resolve that had pushed him to look for a scholar and continue his watch. When his shift to guard the caravan was done, he would lay down a sheepskin and, covering himself with a light cotton cloth, catch brief amounts of sleep in preparation for the next day's journey. One evening, when the moon was a sliver and shadows danced like specters across the sands, the bandits struck. The caravan had just snaked through a jagged ravine, its towering walls of sand-scoured rock hemming them in like a trap waiting to spring. Amadou rode near the center, his horse's hooves clattering against loose stones, the air thick with the musky scent of camel sweat and the faint tang of dust. Something felt wrong. Samba, the caravan leader, raised a gnarled hand, his voice barking through the stillness. Eyes up, weapons close. Amadou's fingers tightened around his dagger, his pulse quickening as he scanned the heights. The ravine narrowed further, the path barely wide enough for 2 camels abreast, and the silence grew heavy, broken only by the creak of leather and the shuffle of feet. A sharp whistle sliced the air, and chaos erupted. Shadows surged from the cliffs, bandits, their turbans dark against the sky, descending with feral cries. Initially silent as snakes, the bandits now slid down the ravines and descended upon the caravan like a tide of darkness with massive. Amadou heard a sudden shout, then the unmistakable clang of steel against steel. Cries pierced the night. Bandits! To arms! Amadou's eyes darted across the ravine, grabbing the short dagger tucked into his sash, even harder than before. Around him, the camp erupted into chaos. Figures darted between the camels, blades flashing in the firelight. The bandits wore strips of cloth across their faces and moved like shadows. Rocks tumbled down, crashing into the caravan as men shouted and camels bellowed. Amadou's horse reared, nearly throwing him, but he yanked the reins, forcing it steady. A bandit landed beside him, boots thudding into the sand, his curved blade flashing as he lunged. Amadou twisted in the saddle, the steel whistling past his ear, and thrust his dagger upward. The bandit parried, their weapons clashing with a grating screech, sparks flaring in the dim light. Sweat stung Amadou's eyes as he kicked his horse forward, breaking free, only to see 3 more raiders charging from the left, their eyes glinting with greed. One of them lunged at Amadou, a curved sword slashing through the air. Amadou ducked, the blade missing his throat by inches. He drove his dagger upward, catching the attacker's arm. The man hissed and fell back, but more followed. "Protect the goods!" Samba roared, swinging a spear that felled one attacker in a spray of blood. Amadou wheeled his horse, heart hammering, as a second bandit leapt from a ledge, aiming for his throat. He ducked, the blade slicing his turban's edge, and drove his dagger into the man's side. The bandit howled, tumbling into the dust, but another seized the moment, grabbing Amadou's leg and yanking him from the saddle. He hit the ground hard, breath exploding from his lungs, sand grinding into his palms. The bandit loomed, a hulking figure with a scarred face, raising a rusted scimitar for the kill. Amadou rolled, the blade slamming into the earth where his head had been, spitting grit into his face. Scrambling to his feet, Amadou gripped his dagger, his chest heaving. The bandit swung again, a wild arc that forced him back against a camel's flank. The beast bucked, its hoof clipping the attacker's shoulder, buying Amadou a heartbeat to lunge. He drove his blade into the man's thigh, twisting it free as the bandit crumpled, clutching the wound. But the fight wasn't over. Hooves thundered behind him, and a mounted raider bore down, lance leveled at his chest. Amadou dove, the tip grazing his arm, tearing cloth and flesh in a hot streak of pain. He landed in a crouch, blood dripping into the sand, and hurled a rock from the ground. It struck the rider's temple, toppling him from the saddle with a sickening crunch. Another bandit grabbed him from behind, pulling him to the ground. The man's breath was hot and sour against Amadou's ear as he pinned him down, dagger raised. With desperate strength, Amadou elbowed him hard in the ribs, breaking free for a moment. He scrambled to his feet, but stumbled backward over a fallen man. His attacker lunged again, blade slicing through the night. Suddenly, one of Amadou's caravan companions appeared, swinging a spear. He drove the weapon into the bandit's side, and the man crumpled. The caravan rallied, guards spearing the last bandits as they fled, their cries fading into the ravine. Amadou staggered upright, clutching his bleeding arm, his turban askew, face smeared with dust and sweat. Samba clapped his shoulder, grunting, "You're tougher than you look." Amadou nodded, breathless, the dream of Kayor burning brighter than the pain. Amadou gasped for breath, blood pounding in his ears. All around the battle raged, firelight illuminating faces twisted in fear and fury. Camels bucked wildly, their bells clanging as they tried to flee. It was a night he would never forget. Death had reached for him and missed. By dawn, the bandits had fled, leaving behind their dead and wounded. Amadou stood trembling in the grey light, a shallow cut across his cheek, his hands still shaking from how close death had come. After performing the last rites and burials for their fallen, Samba led the caravan forward on the final leg of the long journey. Men were limping from their injuries, exhaustion, and dehydration. Their animals were also almost collapsing after such a tiring journey. His horse limped and was almost giving up as Amadou walked ahead of it and pulled it gently using a rope. The animal followed slowly and sometimes stood still, unable to go any further. Amadou would go back to it and whisper reassuring words in its, upon which the animal would join the rest of the caravan. At long last, after weeks of hardship, the spires of Kayor appeared like a shimmering mirage on the horizon. Amadou arrived dusty and weary, but alive. Immediately upon arrival, Amadou made his way to the home of the renowned teacher, Sadiq. Sadiq warmly welcomed him and ordered his children to take the horse to his stables, where it was given water and grass. They took Amadou's luggage and took it to the guest house, where all the learners stayed. "Won't you first rest a little?" the great scholar asked Amadou when he rushed towards the teaching room, where learners seated on the floor were clearly visible even from the gate. "No, my teacher, I have yearned for this day my whole life. I will not wait a minute longer." "Well, then join us," the teacher said and ushered him toward the classroom. There, in the small house built under the shade of giant tamarind trees, he sat at the feet of Sadiq and joined a group of students who had come from distant lands, all seeking the gift of knowledge. Amadou instantly forgot all the tiredness that he had endured throughout the journey and was energized to learn. The courtyard buzzed with the hum of recitations and the scratching of wooden writing boards. Among Amadou's classmates was a man his age who was soft-spoken, mysterious, and quick to learn. For 3 long years, Amadou studied beside this man. Together they traced letters on wooden tablets, recited poetry under the stars, and memorized the sacred verses. They became inseparable, eating together, debating late into the night, and sharing stories of their homelands. By the end of the 3rd year, Amadou had achieved what he came for. He could read and write with ease and was ready to return to Oualo. But his classmate, who had become his closest friend, revealed a secret. On the eve of Amadou's departure, his classmate pulled him aside. "We are friends," he said quietly, "but there is something you do not know about me. I am not entirely human. I am a genie in human form. Since you are returning home, I ask a favor. I will send you to Oualo faster than the winds, but I entrust you with a message for my family." The genie handed Amadou a silver ring. "When you wear this ring, you will see the genies and their villages. Without it, you will see nothing." He instructed Amadou to lay out his sheepskin and sit upon it with other students who wished to return home. "Close your eyes and face the west," the genie said. The students obeyed. As soon as their eyes shut, a green halo surrounded the sheepskin. The ground trembled gently, and then the sheepskin lifted into the air. Amadou felt weightless as they soared over rivers, deserts, and forests. Below, entire villages passed by in a blur. The sheepskin carried not only people, but also cargo. Sacks of millet, bundles of cloth, even camels strapped securely. The wind roared past their ears, and the sky around them shimmered green like a million multicolored lamps. Amadou's heart raced. He looked down at the earth far below, a quilt of sands, rivers, and forests. The sheepskin moved faster than any horse, twisting gently like a leaf on the wind. In an instant, they landed in the middle of Oualo, as if they had merely jumped. Dust swirled around Amadou's feet as he stepped off the sheepskin mat, the green halo fading into the warm Oualo air. The village square buzzed with life, and a cry pierced the stillness. Aissatou, his first wife, spotted him first. She sprinted across the packed earth, her colorful boo-boo billowing, and flung her arms around him, laughter spilling from her lips. "You're back! You're back!" she shouted, her voice trembling with joy. Amadou hugged her tight, the scent of her jasmine oil grounding him as his children swarmed, tugging at his robes. Little Khadija leapt into his arms, squealing, "Baba, did you bring stories?" He grinned, hoisting her high, her giggles ringing like bells. Fatou, his second wife, dashed from their compound, a wide smile splitting her face. She clapped her hands, calling, "He's home!" Our Amadou's home. Neighbors poured from their huts, their cheers rising as they surged forward. Old Mustafa, the griot, thumped his staff against the ground, his gravelly voice booming, "The scholar returns!" Women ululated, their trills echoing off the mud walls, while men slapped Amadou's back, their hands rough with pride. "You've done it, brother," shouted his neighbor. Aissatou grabbed his arm, pulling him toward the compound. "We've cooked all day, rice, fish, groundnut stew," she declared. Inside, the air thickened with savory aromas, and a drumbeat kicked up, urging the crowd to dance as they walked Amadou into his compound. The sun dipped low over Oualo, painting the compound in hues of amber as Amadou settled beneath the baobab tree, his children clustering around him. Khadija nestled in his lap, her wide eyes gleaming, while her brothers sprawled on a woven mat, chins propped on their hands. Aissatou and Fatou lingered nearby, stirring a pot of jollof rice, their ears perked for the tale. Amadou cleared his throat, his voice rich and steady, and began, "I rode through the Sahara, where the sand bites like a scorpion." Khadija gasped, clutching his robe as he swept his arm wide. Storms roared up, swallowing the sky, sand so thick I couldn't see my own horse. I gripped the reins, shouting to the wind, "You won't stop me!" Musa's mouth dropped open, and Amadou grinned, leaning closer. Then bandits struck, leaping from cliffs with blades flashing. One swung at me, swish, but I ducked, stabbing back with my dagger. He fell, and I fought another, tumbling from my horse as his sword grazed my arm. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faint scar, and Ibra whooped, "You're a warrior, Baba." Amadou chuckled, his tone softening. "In Kayor I sat with Sadiq, learning letters that danced like rivers on my slate. And a genie, yes, a genie, flew me home on a sheepskin, high above the dunes, with camels dangling below." Khadija clapped, squealing, "Tell it again." Fatou laughed from the fire, calling, "He's a griot now." Amadou winked, pulling a scrap of parchment from his robe. "See, I wrote this, our name, in ink." The children traced the letters, awestruck as stars winked above, his tales weaving magic into the night. As the night wore on, friends pressed close into the compound, clamoring for tales of Kayor, their eyes bright with awe. He raised his hands, voice steady, "I've learned to read and write." The cheers erupted anew, a wave of love washing over him, home at last. The next morning, after a hearty breakfast, Amadou slid the silver ring onto his middle finger. Instantly, a pulse of power rushed through his veins, as if the sky itself had poured into his body. His eyes widened, and the village of Oualo transformed before him. Colors became sharper, sounds clearer, and beyond the dusty streets, hidden from ordinary eyes, a magical world revealed itself. The Genie village shimmered like a dream. It lay just beyond the baobabs, its houses woven from moonlight and breeze. Trees with silver leaves swayed in a wind that carried the scent of jasmine and cinnamon. Streams flowed with water that sparkled like liquid glass. The villagers were tall and graceful, their blue-tinged skin glowing softly, their movements light as feathers, almost floating above the ground. Amadou followed the path shown to him, arriving at the home of his friend's family. There, under a flowering tree, he sat and delivered the message. As he spoke, a young woman approached with a calabash of water. She was Anta, the genie's sister. Anta's beauty was not of this world. Her eyes held the night sky within them, deep and infinite. Her skin glowed faintly like polished sapphire, and her long braids shimmered with strands of silver. Her voice, when she greeted Amadou, felt like cool water poured over hot stones. When Amadou spoke to the family, they welcomed him warmly. "You must return often," they said. You are now a friend of our house." Amadou returned to his family, but the image of Anta lingered in his thoughts. Each evening, when the sky turned indigo and the stars bloomed, he walked the path to the Genie village and sat with her family. One evening, under the silver glow of the Genie lanterns, he confessed his wish to Anta. "I wish to marry you," he said. Anta smiled, her eyes shimmering. "I would like nothing better," she replied, "but you humans are so quick-tempered, so talkative, and so easily untruthful. Among us, genies do not lie. We never lose our temper and never betray a secret." "If you marry me," Amadou promised, "you will see I am different." Anta nodded. "Then you must pass 3 trials set by my parents." The next day, the trials began. First, Amadou was challenged to outwit a cunning spirit who asked riddles that twisted like serpents. The spirit's voice slithered, "I walk the earth without feet, I speak without a mouth, and I strike without hands. What am I? The wind?" Amadou answered without hesitation. More riddles followed, and Amadou answered each one with patience and cleverness. The second trial tested his literacy. He was handed a parchment inscribed in ancient script and asked to read aloud. The characters danced and shifted, but Amadou read every word clearly and gracefully. The final trial tested his honesty. A genie disguised as a merchant offered Amadou a chest of gold in exchange for a secret about Anta's family. Amadou refused without hesitation. Anta's parents were impressed. "You have passed, Amadou," they said. "We bless this union." Her father nodded and declared, "May it be strong and everlasting." A cheer broke out among the witnesses as Amadou stepped forward, eyes meeting Anta's across the courtyard. a promise fulfilled, and a love hard-earned. "The marriage is settled," Anta declared. "On Mondays and Thursdays, I will come to your hut. But promise me, never let another wife near on those nights, and never tell anyone you married a genie," Amadou promised. They celebrated their marriage with joy. Amadou offered her a heifer as a wedding gift, but Anta asked for nothing more. "I will accept a dowry only when I am certain you are neither hot-tempered nor deceitful." Their days together were filled with wonder. At night, they shared stories and laughter. Anta showed Amadou hidden gardens beneath the desert sands, riverbeds where the moon touched the earth, and markets where spirits traded gemstones for stories. They flew together on her sheepskin, gliding over the villages and forests, dancing above the clouds. Amadou saw the world through her eyes, a world where magic shimmered beneath the surface of everything. Each morning, before the first call to prayer, Anta slipped away, floating back to her village like mist. One night, after Anta left, disaster struck. At 6 in the morning, shouts erupted in the village. Amadou ran to see his millet granary engulfed in flames. Sparks flew into the air like angry bees. Villagers shouted and fought to put out the fire. The granary crumbled, and all the millet inside was lost. Before he could recover, a servant ran to him, breathless. "Your prized horse has dropped dead." Amadou rushed to the stables. His beautiful white stallion lay lifeless on the ground, its eyes glazed. As he stood there, in shock, another man approached. "Your great bull fell into the well." Amadou raced to the well. Villagers struggled to pull out the massive animal. When they finally dragged it up, the bull was dead. Everywhere Amadou turned, disaster greeted him. Defeated, he went alone to sit under the family mango tree and count his losses. "How much bad luck can someone have in one day?" he murmured to himself, wondering which people he might have wronged to deserve such punishment. As Amadou sat in grief, he heard his second wife shouting, "It is your fault! All this ruin follows us!" "Fatou!" He tried to arrest her next words, but it was too late, as she added a bombshell. "It's because you married a genie." Amadou looked at her in dismay as she revealed a secret. He had promised his wife, the genie, to never reveal to anyone. But in a moment of weakness, he had told it to Fatou, who had now voiced it loudly for the whole world to hear. Unseen, Anta listened from afar. Floating above the gate at Amadou's compound, she felt the pangs of his betrayal bite into her heart. A tear dropped from her eye, and upon striking the ground, melted rocks with a furious, invisible fire. Anta was heartbroken. Without saying a word of goodbye to Amadou, she left. She waved her hand on her way out, and the magical ring instantly disappeared from his finger. Weeks passed. Amadou tried to search for her, but it was all in vain. Without the magical ring, he could neither find the village of the genies nor Anta. Months went by. Amadou's longing for Anta grew, but he resigned for his fate. Despite his heartbreak, he poured his heart into the rest of his family and the rice business. Yet, one morning, when Amadou's other wives were away, Anta returned. She woke him gently. "Anta!" Amadou exclaimed. "Where have you been?" "Our marriage is over," she said calmly. "Why?" he asked desperately. "Because you broke your promise. Your wife knew you had married a genie. You spoke when you should have kept silent." Amadou protested, but Anta silenced him. She gave him back the ring, and with it, to see things only visible to the genies. She then opened a shimmering portal in the air. "Look," she said. Amadou saw the night of the disasters unfold again. He saw death, cloaked in shadows, creeping toward his hut. He saw Anta, standing before death, fighting fiercely. 3 times she battled the angel of death, first driving him away from Amadou, then from his wife, and finally from his daughter. Each time, death turned his fury elsewhere. The granary, the horse, the bull. Amadou watched as Anta hurled beams of silver light, her hair whipping around her like a storm. Death, tall and dark, wielded a scythe of shadows. Sparks flew as they fought above the village. The sky trembled, and the earth cracked beneath their power. Anta's voice broke as she spoke. "I gave up everything to protect you. But in the end, your human nature betrayed us." With one last, sorrowful glance, Anta disappeared. Amadou stood alone, the portal fading, the ring once gone from his finger. He never saw her again. And so Amadou, in his old age and still heartbroken by the loss of Anta, sat down and wrote his story. That is the story that I have just narrated to you, as it was written by Amadou, the rice trader who learned how to read and write.
Thanks for watching yet another episode of Timbuktu Tales. Like, share and subscribe to watch more of such amazing tales from Africa. Are there any stories you would like us to work on? Feel free to share your ideas in the comments section below. And hey, don't forget to hit that notification bell to always get updates.